Hello and welcome. In today's episode of the Cole Memo, we'll be watching David Lakeman's interview for the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, something I might refer to as the CCC going forward. Who is David Lakeman? David began working as the Cannabis Division Manager for the Illinois Department of Agriculture in September of 2020, and he currently oversees the medicinal and adult use cannabis industries for the Department of Agriculture, as well as hemp licenses and the hemp program. David Lakeman replaced Jeff Cox, who left the department in June of 2020, and it looks like David Lakeman will be departing in the future for his new position at the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. The three commissioners for the Massachusetts CCC unanimously voted for David Lakeman as the next executive director. Now, his official appointment to the role is subject to his acceptance of the position, salary negotiations, and a background check, commissioners said on Monday earlier this week. But I do believe that he will be accepting this position. We'll talk about that more after the interview. On October 28th, as I mentioned earlier, the CCC held final interviews and ultimately unanimously voted for David Lakeman. And you might be wondering, how are we able to watch his job interview today? Well, that's because the CCC live streams all, or at least most of their meetings. Now, I'm not completely refined on the CCC, but from what I understand, most of their meetings are live streamed and you can watch them after the fact. So when you compare that to Illinois, Illinois does not live stream any of their cannabis policy meetings. The only time you'll see a live stream of a cannabis policy meeting is if there's a debate on the floor at the General Assembly, and there's not often any debate on cannabis policy. The closest thing we saw to that last session was a debate on hemp. We don't have a commission in Illinois. We have several state agencies that sort of work together. And I say sort of because there have been reported problems over the years. I think even representatives of the state of Illinois would agree with the description I just gave. And it's also important to mention that the CCC is not without issues. Because of the problems that we've seen in Illinois, this is why I think regulators would agree with what I just said. There have been consolidation proposals, many of which, or some of which rather, have been supported by our cannabis regulation oversight officer and regulators that work in that department or under that umbrella. The proposals include creating one state agency for cannabis, and there's also been a proposal to create one state commission. What's the difference between a commission and an agency? Well, we've discussed that on the show in the past. I'll have that linked in the show notes, including perspectives from the state of Illinois and from other people involved in cannabis policy. To be honest, I don't really know the difference between an agency and a commission. And in fact, I believe the Cannabis Control Commission is an agency for the state of Massachusetts, or at least I believe I've seen it referred to as such. I could be wrong on that for most of these things. Again, I want you to do your own research because I am not refined on any details with regard to the Massachusetts CCC. We're going to get right into David's interview, but I just want to dwell on a point for a moment. One of the main differences I see between the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission and what we do here in Illinois with our cannabis regulatory bodies is that, again, the CCC live streams a lot of their proceedings. And again, while the CCC is not without issue, transparency allows that to shine. As David Lakeman is about to say, it's all there, warts and all. And that's good. We need to have that transparency because if you don't have transparency about the issues that exist, how will you ever have solutions to those problems? And again, I'm not sitting here saying that we should adopt anything or everything from the CCC, but I do think we should adopt transparency in the form of live streaming. I mean, you're about to see a multi-cam interview between, cannabis regulators, and that's just not something you see in the state of Illinois. I've never watched the CCC except for maybe brief moments that I've seen on Twitter. This is the first CCC meeting I've watched. In the live stream we're about to watch, there are only 3 commissioners present. I believe that's because, some of the other commissioners are just no longer with the commission for one reason or another. Again, do your research on that. They kind of allude to the fact that there's a lot of changes at the commission. I'm not very refined, but from what I understand, there's definitely some interesting things that have happened at the Massachusetts CCC. So definitely look into that. Once again, there has been a history of discussing whether or not the state of Illinois should have a commission or a state agency. And frankly, the people that have supported the idea of a commission have often used the idea of transparency and live streaming the proceedings as a reason to support the idea of a commission. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, but you'll find it out in the episode that I mentioned that the state of Illinois, and I'll have that episode in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. The state of Illinois in the past has supported the idea of a commission, and that was under the leadership of Danielle Perry, who was then Cannabis Regulation Oversight Officer. She ended up departing from that position, and I believe in the next legislative session, I could have the timing a little bit wrong on that, but timing aside, when we had a new Cannabis Regulation Oversight Officer, Aaron Johnson, she seemed to make it clear, and other representatives of that umbrella have made it clear that they are supportive of the idea of an agency, which is ultimately what inspired the episode that, again, I'll have linked in the podcast description. There's a difference in opinion. So the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office believes there should be an agency, while the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, which represents some of the largest cannabis businesses in Illinois, in the past have indicated that they believe there should be a commission. Now, it should also be acknowledged that CBAI has gone under a change of leadership. If you check out the episode that I've made reference to at least 3 times now, the old executive director for CBAI has been on my show in the past. Her perspective is mentioned in that episode. And it's very possible that there's been a change of guard and maybe they don't support CBAI. Maybe they don't support the idea of a commission anymore. I'm not exactly sure. I believe they didn't release a legislative agenda, if you will, last session. And it seemed like their number one priority for the legislative session was to regulate hemp via their proposal with Leader Lightford. The big thing I want you to take home, and I'll talk more about this later, but I just think it's so cool that this is live streamed. You know, it may not be perfect, but the fact that it's on the record and you can watch it back. And by the way, I'll have a link to the full hearing if you want to check that out in the show notes as well. But without further ado, let's watch it. Let's see how David managed to land this position. Again, the CCC voted unanimously to appoint him as the executive director, and that's pending his acceptance. So let's get right into it. Here we are, David Lakeman's interview with the Cannabis Control Commission. I'll jump in just a few times, but I'll mostly just let this play. And then again, we'll have a little bit of conversation after the interview. I'll have some more thoughts to share before I close out the episode. Let's watch it.
Yes, in person as well.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
That's for you.
That's for you.
Morning, myself.
I'm
Be
sure.
be sure to take it with you when you're done. Just refill it to the next person.
Thank you. Thank you. It's trying to get the way in the meeting room, but you never know.
Well, good morning, colleagues. Our first candidate is David Lakeman. David, we'll just introduce ourselves to you real quickly. You might know who we are already, but I'll invite my colleagues to introduce themselves. Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, first of all. Nuris Camargo. I've been here about 4 years now. I'm the social justice seat at the commission. I'm sure you know how the commissioners are appointed here. I hope you do. And I have years of experience in Massachusetts state government, in the criminal justice system, in the corporate sector as well, and the nonprofit sector as well. And been leading in recent conversations here around social consumption at the commission, and a host of many things. But that's a quick little update. Love what I do here. Very committed to policy making and making sure that our team two-way communication with our team. So yeah, that's quick. Probably not the best, but you're our secretary. Oh, Right, and I'm the secretary of the commission, and I did serve as a treasurer.
And you're the treasurer.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot going on right now. So, but yeah, thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Roy.
Good morning, David. Thank you so much for your interest in this extremely important position at the commission. I'm Kimberly Roy. I sit in the designated public health seat. I was appointed by Governor Baker. It's 3 years into my term now. It's always fast-paced, interesting, evolving, emerging, all of those descriptors for the cannabis industry. I have been focused. We all are focused on so many issues. Some of my focus is I was on the HCA working group with the implementation of Chapter 180, veterans access. I've tried to advocate for increased medical use for our veterans. Research, I think the future of cannabis really is dependent on research. The plant is thousands of years old, and there's been very little public investment into research. So I think there's tons of opportunity there. Labs and testing has been on the forefront of my mind as well. So I'm very interested and I did read a lot about your experience, your expertise. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you today. And again, thank you so much for your interest in this position.
David Bruce Evans, currently serving as acting chair, but I was appointed to fill the regulated industry seat. And I came over to the Cannabis Commission from the Mass Gaming Commission. And my background and interests have always been around business and economic development and job creation. So certainly excited to maybe not being an inaugural commissioner, but the second set and seeing the success that this industry can have. So with that, any opening thoughts or anything you would like to share?
Sure. Any questions, right?
Oh, it was already on.
Great.
There you go.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you. And just to start with, thank you for doing the introduction, which I'll have to do 3 additional times. No, I appreciate it. Again, my name is David Lakeman. I'm currently the head of the cannabis division at the Illinois Department of Agriculture. But prior to joining the Illinois Department, I was here for 5 years in Massachusetts, where I was the, I believe, 6th staff member hired by the commission from 2018 to 2020. So when we talk about an awareness of how that was, I came to the commission from the Massachusetts Municipal Association, where I was actually on a legislative working group that sort of paused and reconfigured the ballot initiative passed in question 4. So the compromise moving out of the treasurer's office, the compromise in determining where the commissioners would come from, very aware of the entire process and sort of the history, institutional knowledge, how we got here. We left to go back to Illinois at the height of COVID in order to be closer to family. And I'm excited to be here to have a conversation with you about sort of what the future might hold. So thank you again for taking the time and having me here this morning. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Great. All right, we'll jump into the questioning. Commissioner Roy has offered to go first.
Excellent. So, number 1. The executive director job description for the Cannabis Control Commission states applicants should have quote, an understanding of the Massachusetts cannabis industry, as well as knowledge of the national industry development and trends, end quote. Can you share with us how your previous experience meets this requirement? If possible, cite specific examples of your industry understanding. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like I got a little ahead of myself there even with the introduction. So we'll start with the Massachusetts experience. So again, my wife and I came to Massachusetts in 2015 from Illinois. She was here to start her PhD program. She is, for the record, far smarter than I am. But then she agreed to marry me, so she can't be that smart, I guess. So we came out here in 2015, where I started with the Massachusetts Municipal Association. One of the initial topics that was put in my portfolio from the start was the medical cannabis program, and then also question 4 at the time, the legalization ballot question in 2016. So I went around and I visited about 2/3 of the cities and towns in Massachusetts, speaking to local officials, speaking to zoning boards, public health, every local body of government you can imagine in the Commonwealth to discuss the potential impacts of legalization. And throughout that experience, again, we engaged with the legislature, we engaged with other partners. And so when the question passed, again, the legislature reached out to me to work with the legislative working group that initially took a role in reshaping what the ballot question was. So I did that work from late 2016 through the beginning and middle of 2017 when the finalized and revised laws were passed. And of course, the initial commission was appointed. The previous executive director was appointed in September of 2017, and I was hired in February of 2018. As the commission's first director of government affairs, I had a large role in crafting the commission's initial set of administrative rules, working with them, working again with our legislative partners, doing the public hearings, staffing many of the public meetings, including the Cannabis Advisory Board, as well as several of the special committees that initially met under the auspices of the commission. So the Special Commission on Operating Under the Influence, the Energy Efficiency Committee, and others. So in terms of my experience and familiarity with the laws governing the Massachusetts cannabis industry, I am deeply aware and indeed had a very large hand in helping to craft from the onset. To move on to the questions of national cannabis policy, I come to you as perhaps one of the few that is able to say that I have been, a regulator in 2 states. I have represented Illinois in some of our visits to CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association. I worked very closely with our colleagues. In my time at the commission, excuse me, I worked very closely with many of our colleagues in New England who legalized shortly after Massachusetts did, especially our colleagues in Maine. We also engaged very early on with some of our colleagues in California, Oregon, and Colorado. Before, in fact, CANRA was officially founded, we hosted one of the very first meetings of then cannabis regulators here in Boston in 2018. So again, that experience goes back to the very beginning, not only of the Massachusetts program, but at the beginning of the very first cohort of states that legalized. And now, of course, I've had 4 years of managing a program in Illinois, which is in many ways very different. Illinois, I think, is unique in that our regulatory structure is split up. So at the Department of Agriculture, we regulate about 85% of the market. The dispensaries are regulated at a different department. And then we also work with the Department of Public Health for the medical program, which was true in the commission until we integrated with the DPHT. So what does that boil down to? Ultimately, I have a great deal of experience, I think probably matched only by a handful of people nationwide, of regulating multiple state programs, while also having been here from the very onset of the Massachusetts program. The subject matter expertise is very deep, and that is something that I'm able to bring to the commission, both in terms of institutional knowledge and knowing how we got here, but also being able to then bring an outside perspective with a great deal of management experience and policy experience from outside the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you for that background. So I'm sure as a candidate, you've done all your homework on the current CCC. I would say that. Knowing that the CCC is in a transitional phase right now, why do you want to come work here?
To start, when I started, we made the joke often back in 2018 that we had the worst aspects of a company startup and also the worst aspects of a government agency, right? We had nothing. We were not set up. And I still recall the office at 101 Federal, right? We had a table we brought in literally from a garage sale. We had a printer and a small fridge we bought off of Amazon. We had all maybe borrowed a few pens from the places we came from to get started, right? This is something I'm deeply aware of. When I went back to Illinois, home state that I love very much, the office staff for the cannabis program was 2 people, and there were 5 field inspectors. As of the time that I'm sitting here, our approved head count is 102. We have gone from 21 licensees to well over 400. My experience, the whole of my career for the last 6 years, has been building new. If I had a dime for every time I had said, we're building the plane midair, a joke that I'm sure my staff is tired of hearing, I could probably retire at this point. At this point, this is my experience. I have done this now twice. We have built a program in Illinois that I am deeply proud of. At the Department of Agriculture, we have built one of the most diverse staffs at the department. We have built a licensing structure that is effective and for the 21st century. We have built what our recent disparity study has said is the most equitable cannabis industry in the United States. And we have done that from the perspective of a department that has not traditionally done these things. It has been an incredible partnership with our current administration, with the other department teams, but we have done the work, right? We have created a staff that reflects the industry that we are regulating. We have built from nothing, and in the very height of COVID, and our licensing process was actually scheduled to begin the third week of March 2020. And obviously there were a lot of challenges involved with that. But we have come from that to build something that I think demonstrates Illinois as a leader from work that we did in Massachusetts prior to my departure, in which we were a leader. But you have the chance, and my experience is that I have regulated and I have led in 2 agencies that happen to lead the 2 most equitable industries in the United States. Right? This is the work that I've committed myself to, not just the words, right, but actually following through and seeing that turn into action. This is an important thing we do. When the commission was founded, and I believe this to my core, it was meant to be different. We had the opportunity to not just be a regulator, but to genuinely be an inspiration. We had the ability to show what government in the 21st century could be when started fresh. We had the ability to be a regulatory agency that didn't just regulate, but actively undid harms that had been previously done to communities across our Commonwealth for decades. And we had the chance to do that in a representative, thoughtful way. And I'm proud of that. And those messages, that experience came back to Illinois with me. Again, my staff would tell you they're tired of hearing, but I tell them all the time, we have one bite at the apple. We can make a government unit that helps to restore faith in government by being responsive, by being efficient, by doing things differently. Not just for our licensees, which is of course important, but also how we treat our staff, creating an environment of trust and innovation. We're not ossified yet. We don't have practices and procedures that are stuck because that's just the way we've always done them. We have the ability to truly do this differently, and that's how the commission was founded, right? And there have been challenges here, right? And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, right? But so many of those are solvable if we just remove a little bit of the confusion and get focused back on the core mission, because this team is amazing. The people here are incredible, dedicated public servants, and they always have been. The work that you at the commission do, it is challenging, it is hard, but you are doing it for the right reasons, and you are doing this because it must be done. I have the experience to help maybe get us back on track, to provide that steady leadership that Illinois has been and the Department of Agriculture has been, a sign of for the last 4 years, and do that here. This is a mission I deeply believe in. This is a mission I've committed the last 6 years of my professional career to, and it's one that I feel that I'm uniquely qualified to do for the commission.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Quick clarification question. Is someone taking time, or is there, in terms of, okay, so we're just kind of going, okay, all right, thank you.
So when we get closer, you guys are going to play the Oscars music, and they'll start edging out to me with this.
Okay.
Obviously, good to know.
Yeah.
If you're still in front of us at 2:00, we have a problem. David, this industry has a lot of stakeholders.
Yes.
Licensees, industry organizations and coalitions, or social equity and economic empowerment participants, patients, other government officials, public health and safety leaders, industry employees, and members of the general public. How do you feel your experience will serve you to effectively engage with so many stakeholders, in addition to the fact that you chair the executive director chairs the Cannabis Advisory Board, which also has numerous volunteer appointees.
It does. And in fact, again, to answer your question in reverse, in my entire time at the commission as the government affairs staff, I staffed the executive director and the cannabis advisory board. So for the first 2 years of its existence, I was the point person for the advisory board's members. I prepared and issued the addendums, worked with the executive director to set the agenda, to coordinate all the information we had coming in, the extensive initial PowerPoints that we've had. I would take all of the inputs in from all of the stakeholders and I would put those into a cohesive document that we're able to go through. So, the first round of rule recommendations from the advisory board, I worked with every single member to collate, pull together their recommendations to make sure that they were actually saying what they wanted to say. Right. And so well aware of the unique structure of the advisory board and many of the other ways that the commission interacts with all of the stakeholders that you mentioned. Right. So again, I worked extensively with the advisory board. I know exactly how it operates and have worked with many of them. I worked with the commission when we did the initial public hearings for our administrative rules, and then again several of the rule updates in 2020. So again, some of the social consumption rules, the transport rules, right? Those are some of the things that we were looking at when I left. In terms of working with the outside groups, again, this is something I have a great deal of experience, both in Massachusetts and in Illinois. We had to hold public hearings for our hemp rules, for instance, engaging with stakeholders, engaging with farmers, engaging with the industry, with the legislators and legislative process. Doing so in an often public, exposed way. And this is one of the key things I think that is so important about the commission and the work that it does and the processes that we have, because it is public, right? It is open. I still speak often of the public data portal, right? Because it's all there, right? Warts and all, right? You can see exactly what it is that the commission is doing. How are we doing? There are established metrics by which you can look and see that. So engaging with the public in this way is so key to both establishing and maintaining trust with the public that we serve, right? Especially in challenging times. It is the role of the executive director, it is the role of the commission to be above reproach. We've got to come out and say, this is what we're thinking and this is why, right? We've been through a challenging year. Here's how we're going to be better. Here's how we're going to learn from that and move forward. I think that's going to be so necessary with those groups that you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, and also with the legislative process, right? Mm-hmm. Full communication, full engagement, and an understanding that they need to hear from us and we need to hear from them in order to be the best possible regulatory agency that we can be.
Thank you, David. Sure, go right ahead.
David, you mentioned the open data portal.
Yes.
Like that warts and all. I might have to steal that.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's true.
We collect phrases. So I'm going to collect that one. And I've said many times, transparency is vital in any government agency to assure and maintain public trust. And you pretty much that's what you were saying. So as the next executive director, do you have any examples where even around the open data portal where you would want to increase transparency?
That's a good question. I think that there's always areas to improve, right? As much as I think the commission has done excellent work, as much as we've done great work at the Illinois Department of Agriculture, you in the day always know you could do better, and tomorrow you have to. I think that the data portal, right? I mean, it's an excellent resource. Is there a way to make that a little bit more easily accessible? I think that that's possible. But again, I think that that's through the input of the communities and the groups we work with. What do you need? One of the things that we do at the Department of Agriculture is we meet with every licensee as they are approaching operational status or they want to build out, right? And we allow them to sit down with anybody they want on their side. So their contractors, their lawyers if they want, their architects, their HVAC person, and they get access to us and our leadership team in the division. And we sit down and we say, what do you want to know? What do you want to go through? And those calls can last 2 hours. But that is fully transparent, and that's us offering them the resources they need to be successful. And part of that is due to input we got from licensees saying, hey, this is tough, right? The grower operations, as you all know, are one of the most complex pieces of this industry. And it's not easy, especially coming from outside in our equity program. If you've never run a business before, if you've never built a complex quasi-industrial, quasi-agricultural building that has to meet OSHA, that has to meet local zoning codes, it has to meet DPH codes if you're building a kitchen, not to mention ISP security requirements and also the department's rules. It is complex. In which order to do those things in is a confidence. And so we've been able to shape that process through that input and that open communication to be something that I think actually reflects what our licensees need, not just what we think they need. And so that's just an example of if there are questions, right? If there are areas in which the legislature would like us to be more transparent, or again, any of our licensees or the groups that we work with, it's all about listening and communicating and understanding that, but then also turning that into an actionable item. Because just listening isn't enough. That has to then turn into something that actually makes the system better or different. And that's something I think that we at the department have excelled at, that our administration has excelled at. And again, I think it's some of the skill set that I can bring to the commission.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the easy follow-up.
Sure.
Okay. Please explain, in your view, how the regulated cannabis industry intersects with public health and public safety. And as the next executive director, what steps would you take to expand and ensure public health and safety in the Massachusetts industry are met?
Sure. The public health piece of this is absolutely foundational, right? The cornerstone of a safe and legal industry is the knowledge that if you are a consumer or if you are a patient, the product you are purchasing and consuming is safe. That is one of the ultimate cornerstones, foundations of the legal industry. And it is vital and incumbent on the commission to ensure that that mission is met, especially given where we are, that we still lack the federal partners that any other consumable item would have. There remains no FDA input. There remains no USDA input. There remains conflicting DEA input, right? The resources on which, MDR has for agricultural products does not exist here, or if at the Illinois Department for Meat and Poultry, or even weights and measures, it doesn't exist for this industry. One of the things I am proudest of in Illinois that we are doing is we are building one of the nation's very first cannabis testing labs run by the cannabis regulator. So we are building that lab as we speak, and it will be operational shortly. This is something we've been working on for 2 years. It has been an incredible amount of work. And if you told, David 4 years ago that I would be coming to this table with not only a broad knowledge of this, but also understanding the differences between an LCMS and a PCR and a centrifuge, or even the fact that you refer to it as an instrument and not a machine, which I was very quickly corrected on when we got our new lab bureau chief. I would have been surprised. But that has been a huge piece of what my work the last 2 years has been, and a piece of the foresight, both for the department and that I would bring to the commission. The lab is going to be an incredible tool for us. It will serve not only as a compliance tool, right, in which we can work with our licensees and also our independent testing labs, but it's also going to serve as the focal point for our research, right? The state universities in Illinois are doing incredible work. I just had the privilege of getting to be the keynote speaker at the Southern Illinois University Carbondale's Cannabis and Hemp Symposium, and the science they are doing is incredible. Right? Because we don't have it. I mean, to your opening statement, what regulated industry is there that lacks in basic research to this degree? It is, how many times as policymakers do you say, I wish we had more data to inform this decision, right? And so what we have done in Illinois is we have acted on that. And that lab is going to be up and running within the next few months. We are staffing it up. We have the instruments that's being built out. We're going to be able to serve those scientific functions, but we are also going to serve as the center point for that research. We're going to work with and act both as a force multiplier for our labs, but have them act as a force multiplier for us. We are exploring the use of a large language AI model to assist with some of the just heavy analytic work. One of the initial things we're looking at is analyzing and using that to analyze pesticide data going all the way back to the medical program. It will allow us to start pushing forward research on the hops latent viroid, which is a challenge across the industry. And again, if I had just even gone to myself 4 years ago and known that I was going to understand the difference between sort of the lunar lander module structure of a virus versus the sort of curved cane structure of a viroid, I would have been very surprised. But this is exactly what regulators need to be doing. So in terms of the public health aspect, in terms of the science and research aspect, that is not my background. But I now know exactly how to bring all the people of that background together to focus them on a primary goal, to build a functioning lab, to work with the labs, to know how to enforce ISO standards, to know, are your pesticide screens accurate? Are you looking at, how are you doing your potency tests? Right. I just read your op-ed, Mr. Chairman, about the testing process. That's exactly what we're looking to tackle. Right. We'll be able to serve as an enforcement tool, as a resource tool, and not only in Illinois, we'd be a leader in cannabis policy and equity, but also in research. And the commission is a leader in research. That's always been known. That's one of the chief strengths the commission has. And one of the chief roles of the executive director is going to be offering that experience, right? Offering the experience.
So we're going to briefly pause this for a moment. You can see my phone screen right now. Anyways, this is some breaking news, some interesting stuff. I wrote more about it in length in an article that I'm displaying on my screen right now. You can check it out in the show notes. The headline is Illinois Bureau of Cannabis Testing Lab is focusing, quote, exclusively on getting lab open for state testing. It includes some of the statements that you just heard from David Lakeman and much more. If you're curious to learn more about the cannabis testing lab, it's something that I've been trying to keep track of for a while. So definitely check that out if you want to learn more. Let's get back to the interview.
To building a lab, of working with research institutions, and making sure that I am giving all the support that I can to the commissioner charged with it, to our research director, to all those who are involved in this, to really make sure that Massachusetts example shines again the same way that we are in Illinois.
I just have a follow-up to that. And thank you so much for that answer. And it kind of piggybacks on Chair Stebbins' question, buy-in from stakeholders. And we all know these things aren't free.
They're not.
They're not. So just quickly, can you just share how you got buy-in, how you were able to get to the starting point to ribbon cutting, let's say, in a couple of months, and how you got that maybe from the Illinois legislature?
Yes.
You share with us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was an extensive process, right? And it started with, again, really great leadership at the Illinois Department of Agriculture, right? And that was something that they were interested in. The department hosts several other labs, the seed lab, the pesticide lab, the metrology lab. So the infrastructure was there, right? We knew how to do it. And so once we came to that idea very early on, that first came to me, the idea came to me in September of 2020, the very first month I was there. And, we'll just walk through the process quickly. I mean, first, you've got to figure out exactly what your physical location is going to be. In our case, we had an unused serology lab that was a pretty good fit for it, which is testing for animal diseases. And moving from there to identify, what are the physical needs going to be? What are the instrument needs going to be? What are the staffing needs going to be? So developing that plan, doing the research, going to the independent testing laboratories and getting a sense of, what do you guys do? Going to the University of Illinois healthcare system, trying to understand what they look at. We've been engaged with the public health affiliated lab that was doing some work on COVID testing, because the PCR testing that they use is also useful for cannabis. We then brought on some folks, someone from the EPA and someone from the Illinois State Police, to help us then sort of draft a map forward. What are our guideposts going to be? What are we looking for? What are the metrics we need? What are the deliverables we need? And how do we execute on that? We were then able to go to the state legislature, and we were able to give them a 5-year budget that was very, very up in the air, but the 2-year budget was the main thing. And this is what we think we're going to be looking for. And it builds off of what the department is already doing. consistently, I've gone to all of the department's budget hearings since joining the department, and there's always a lot of questions about cannabis. So we were able to work through those, work with key stakeholders to make sure that the funding was approved, which it was. Work with the department, which was extraordinarily supportive, in the administration in terms of getting this done and knowing it was a priority for the cannabis industry. And look, I won't lie to you, there were some fits and starts. We were initially kind of working through state building, and then we were able to work with and identify our organization that does build outs for hospital testing laboratories. They've been the lead contractor on getting it built, which allowed us again to focus on what we need to focus on and let them come in with their expertise to actually do the build out. Identifying then the vendors, looking at different vendors. I don't want to use any names because I don't want to get us in trouble. If the commission moves down that route, but working with those vendors for those instruments to develop training programs, to develop SOPs, to determine which instruments to buy, how to have them installed, calibrated, verified, and setting those things up. And now working on developing the staff, right? Which is also key. What staff do we need? What are the goals of the lab? What do we want it to do? So again, developing a training program for them, developing SOPs for them. And again, it's the things that you don't think about, right? But that's the meat and potatoes of state government, is not just setting the policy, but understanding how to execute. And again, that is one of the chief strengths I'm going to bring to you, is not only understanding the policy, which I've been immersed in for 6-7 years now, but also how to actually make government and an agency work to accomplish those objectives, and doing so in a way that actually completes the mission. So, we've hired a bureau chief, which we were able to hire from the Illinois State Police. He's been doing great work, 20 years of experience in the chemistry field. We've got a couple of chemists coming on board. We've got a position called an environmental health specialist, which will help us with ingredient review and other things along those lines. But again, and now I will use the metaphor, and I apologize to all of you, we really are building the plane midair, right? We're developing what it's going to be while the boarding process is on our way. And at any given point, one of the wings may be on fire, right? Which again, you're all very familiar with. But we are going to be operational, and we are going to be a key tool in complying, because it wasn't just an idea. We identified the need, we moved forward on it, and we have done the work to get it established in just 2 short years, which for a state agency to build an entirely new lab with no roadmap, with no preconceived notions, with no set concept of what it should look like. I think that is impressive, and it's something I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah.
Commissioner Camargo.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for staying away through all that. So
Yeah, no. I'm listening. I'm processing while you answer your questions. So we have you all went through a whole process in terms of questions that were asked, and we weren't privy to the answers, right? So you kind of just got here. You all got here as a top 4 candidates, but little bit about if a situation, but describe a situation where you successfully address systemic racism in the workplace.
one of the key metrics we had, and one of the things that really stuck with me from the early days of the commission, was the philosophy of ensuring a diverse staff that represented the industry, looked like the industry that we were regulating, right? And I'm aware, even through this process, that having a diverse pool of candidates can sometimes be a challenge. That has always been a key part of my philosophy as a manager, is ensuring that I'm using all of the tools I have to make sure that we have an open and diverse workforce, and that also reflects the work that we do, right? And in certain circumstances, that can be difficult, right? In the Illinois system, you work with the bargaining unit, there are rules, people have rights to positions, and that can be a challenge. So one of the things that I have done, because it is difficult to not only have a diverse workforce, and this is true anywhere, right, but especially following state rules, is to get someone from outside state service. So one of the things that we have done is to create an entry level position that is one of the few in the state structure that allows for the possibility that outside folks from outside the state are able to apply and get those positions. And I have kept those positions, and then we encourage them, we train them, we do an exceptional amount of development with our staff. I meet with every single one of the headcount that I mentioned to get a sense of what are your goals? What are you looking for from working here in cannabis, working here at the Department of Agriculture? I met with every one of them, and we work on those goals and making track of them to develop the individuals that work with us so that they're able to move up in the state system for populations that might not have had that opportunity if not focused on. I work very closely with Latino and Black caucuses in the Illinois legislature. And for every one of our job postings, we send those to them so that we're actually engaging with the communities that we are looking to represent in our workforce. We also engage with dailies, with local newspapers in all of the regions that we're trying to hire. I have encouraged and been proud to see that the division has exceptionally high participation in the department's DEI committee. I know that the commission had worked along those lines as well, which allows me to hear directly from those communities to be sure that we are taking steps to address any of those issues that may arise. And not only to do that, but to also be proactive, to look at things that we can do better so that we are ensuring a diverse workforce. We created a Spanish-speaking office staff for the Illinois Department of Agriculture. We were the first cannabis regulatory unit in Illinois to translate our rules and regulations, both for adult and medical use cannabis, but also for hemp into Spanish. We have gone into those communities to engage with those communities, both in terms of, the regulator, but also as a potential employer, because this is important to them. And we could talk about it all we want, but what matters is action. Action to address those things, actions to use the tools available to a manager, to the director, to actively create a diverse workforce, to address any potential, to address, again, the harms of the war on drugs, to address any instances of systematic racism in hiring, following the guidelines set by our DEI committee and actively engaging with them, and ensuring that I'm doing the work to do this. This isn't just something we talk about. This is something we have acted on. And
they just told them,
All right, you guys are off mute.
see,
Right.
were you in the
Excuse me. Hello,
audience?
Hey,
you.
someone's off mute.
It's okay, it happens.
Listen, that it could have been way worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could have been talking about you.
Exactly.
They weren't. Sorry about that.
This guy isn't straight.
Yeah.
He's the fish cat, right?
Sorry about that.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
I have experience with our public meetings.
I hit the timer actually at first.
I know.
Well, that was my first thought.
Were you finished with your thought?
No, I'll just finish up to say, this is not just something I talk about. This is something I do. And it has been a key philosophy for me as a manager that I brought from the commission when I was here, that I've worked with our department and our administration. This is something that's key all the way up to the governor. It's something that I believe deeply in, that I have also taken the action, again, to use the tools of a state agency to actually follow through on. We have made those actions. We have done that work. And at the end of each day, my only approach to that is to say, we've had a good start. We have to do better. How can I do better at addressing these things, at using that privilege, using those power structures to lift up the communities that we are working with? And that is how I judge the success of the day, is how have we done that or not?
Thank you.
David, with our current organizational structure, you would be responsible for managing about 8 chiefs. You're reporting to 5 appointed commissioners. And as I said, by statute, you chair a volunteer appointee cannabis advisory.
Yes.
What do you see are the critical elements for effective organization management to succeed? And what experience do you bring to the position to manage and lead the commission team?
The key first piece there is communication. This communication both on the receiving end and on the giving end. understanding what the needs of each part of your organization are and doing your best to meet them. And also then explaining how you are trying to meet those needs and how you are addressing the things that are brought to you. Like, as I mentioned before, right, when I started, we had 2 people, and we are now at a head count of 102. Right, we've gone from being a one bureau to being a division structure with 3 bureaus that report to me. Every one of those positions has required a new job description. I mean, we didn't, again, to the early days of the commission, we didn't have chairs, we didn't have desks, we didn't have computers. This is a brand new program. So we have hired each of those positions, and that only entails, again, just the basic job description. But how are you going to do that job? Right? Because no one's held it before. Every single one of those positions was the very first position to do the job. And we have done so in a way that focuses on culture, right? A culture of mutual support, a culture where a question is not seen as somehow something you're going to have to pay for later, because we're all in this together, right? Especially at the beginning, it was triage, right? When we hired our first bureau chiefs, we were trying to get this industry off the ground. It was the middle of COVID. There had been numerous lawsuits, there had been delays, and we had to get the thing up and running. So fostering a culture and a pattern of cooperative leadership, of listening, of evolution, right? Now, this position, my position currently, and this position, you can't be, this isn't like the director of an established agency that's been around for, 100 years. You simply can't do it that way. You have to adjust, learn, and grow with the demands that are upon you, right? And to answer your question, I mean, that has been the sole topic of my experience for the last 4 years. Growing a regulatory unit, developing the people who work for me, developing the people that work for, each level of management, being available, listening to them, working with, as you said, our outside bodies, that involves the legislature, learning what their needs are, what they want to see, working with our interest groups, working with our, working with the communities that we work with. And to your question, right, I don't currently manage under a commission, but I do manage with several other agencies that are entirely outside of my organizational hierarchy, right? If we need something, if there's an issue with a dispensary, our means of dealing with that relies solely on my working relationship and the department's working relationship with the other department. We have to work together, even when there's not an organizational structure that says we have to. And it relies on those soft skills, being able to work with others and leading in a way in which you don't actually have the established authority to do so, and also leading in a way that lifts others up to lead when they need to. So working with the Department of Public Health when health issues arise, working with the Illinois State Police when there's a criminal issue, working with DPH on the medical program, and working with the dispensary department when needs arise. We also have an office that helps to coordinate all those agencies, the Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office. So again, to your question, do I have a commission to work with? No, but we have this different structure that requires a great deal of compromise, of work, of communication to manage and ensure that the program is managed with the stability and functionality that it has. Because those issues come up, right? I mean, and just, for the hypothetical, imagine if you had to go to another commission if there were an issue in a dispensary versus a grower, right? It is a challenge, but we manage it and we do so in a way that is steady, that is transparent, that is focused and predictable for the staff and for the industry. This is a skill set that it has been required to develop. And it is one that's easily applicable back to the commission, which of course I already have a great deal of experience working with. Sure.
David, then if it's not commissioners, what is your reporting structure? Who do you report to?
So I report to the director of the Department of Agriculture. And he's been an incredible resource. He came to the department from the legislature where he chaired the Ag Committee. And he has been a great support. He has been a great mentor. And I work also with our chief of staff and deputy director. And they have been incredible in terms of the support that they offer, the mentorship that they offer, and the development they offer. The lab would not have been possible without working with them to get that done. And then with them, we work with the directors and responsible program heads the other departments. And I appreciate the question because, when you look at a resume that says division manager, what does that mean? Right? That's not a clear title, right? And so I'll just take, 2 minutes to just explain that a little bit, if that's all right with you. So, the org chart is the director, and then there's me. And for all of the bureaus, they all report directly to me. And then there's division level staff, so our cannabis counsel, our fiscal manager, we have a paralegal, a couple of other positions that report directly to me. And then I have bureau chiefs of the separate sections, the licensing section, the inspection section, the lab, that all report up to me with their field staff reporting up through respective supervisors. So again, while it is different for the executive director, it is also actually remarkably similar, just with a separate level above. So I work directly with our legal counsel. I work directly with our CFO, with our HR, in terms of doing hiring, in terms of the physical plant needs, right? We've made enormous changes to our physical plant since I've started at the department, where we have, again, created a place where people want to work. And so it is still the act of being a head regulator. I'm still responsible for all the people that work for me, and I still manage all of them, and then I report to the director. So in terms of that experience, again, what does the division manager do? That is what I do. And I appreciate the chance to clarify.
I have my third question. So I think we're at our third question each. Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's got to go first. Then you.
Okay.
The third question.
Yeah. I was going to ask just the follow-up questions. Are we counting the follow-up questions? Okay. Okay.
You want to follow up or clarify anything
Yeah.
you said in response to anybody's
I
question?
do. I kind of do.
This one?
Yeah. But I don't know if it becomes my third question.
If it's, again, trying to keep it to, is it following up on something that is said in response to an answer? Then
Yeah. Okay.
that doesn't count.
I think it's response to a comment that Commissioner Roy made, but then asked and triggered that question. So I'll just ask the question and see if it's a follow-up. But so Commissioner Roy asked you in terms of the makeup of your current role. Here at the CCC, you have 5 commissioners, and the executive director reports to the 5 commissioners, the board chair. And I just wanted to hear a little bit of that in terms of how do you envision that dynamics, or that that work chart in terms of working with commissioners, managing, collaborating. I think it's one of the most challenging things of this role. And I think it kind of relates to, just Commissioner Roy's, question.
Yeah, I have read and I'm aware of several of the reports that were sent to the legislature recently. I'm aware that the commission has been working on a clarification of that workflow for a year or two. I'm also aware of kind of some of the challenges right when we started up. And I think that clarifying that process is obviously going to be probably the very first agenda item for the next executive director. There have been obviously a number of challenges there. And so working with the commission, working with, frankly, at this point, our partners in the legislature. I know there's a hearing, I think, 2 days from now. But ensuring that, again, those lines of communication are clear and that there's a structure that mitigates and neutralizes some of the, if I'm being frank, just some of the nonsense that you guys have been dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is man-made. This is not anything that we cannot fix. Every one of you as commissioners and all the staff are extremely smart, extremely dedicated public servants. This can get fixed. And it is, I think, about 80% of that is something that once you have the full-time executive director who can work with the commission staff to clarify exactly where we've been and also determine what we need to do moving forward. Again, this has been my skill set for the last 4 years. Again, so when we started, we were just one bureau, and we've now moved to a division with multiple bureaus. What does the reporting structure look like? What is the process by which the lab interacts with the inspections team? What is the process by which we do a pre-construction review? And how does that interact between the licensing bureau and the inspections bureau? Right? That has been the sum of my experience for the last 4 years, is building those systems, refining them, and determining how they work together. Right. This is a skill set, again, solely within cannabis and building a new organization that is matched only by a handful across the country. And that's an experience that I absolutely can bring to the commission in terms of clarifying these roles, and then also communicating it, working with our staff to understand that process, making sure that those needs are met, working with you to make sure that your needs and your concerns are met. And then also, I don't need a tour guide to show me where the committee on marijuana policy means, right? I know how to do that. I know how to manage. I know how to create and develop policies, procedures, and systems, and do all of that as a comprehensive whole, and knowing how each of those pieces moves and needs to move together. And again, the specific players involved in Massachusetts. And that's an experience that is ready on day one. The commission doesn't have time to teach someone how to testify or what the policy issues are. And it also really doesn't have time to teach them how to manage and develop systems or policies. That is what my strength is. That is what my strength has been. And that's what I'm ready to bring.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you.
A strong response by David Lakeman. You gotta admire that. He definitely has a way with words. I just wanted to say that as we continue to watch this. We're going to continue watching his interview. Looking forward to a small mention of an Illinois testing issue that I recall seeing him mention.
Okay, I have a multi-part question,
Right.
and it sort of segues from Acting Chair Stebbins' question around organizational structure. So it's multi-part. In your professional experience, what is the largest number of employees you have managed at any one time? Have you managed a budget? And if so, what size? And based on your understanding and research of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, what are some things you might do differently from previous leadership here?
Sure. So the highest number of employees I've managed is my current role. Again, our approved headcount is 102. We're building it out. It fluctuates, but that is the current number. I have a great deal of experience with managing the budget. So as the division manager, in addition to helping manage the legislative process, managing the hiring, managing people, I've also been charged the last 4 years with working with our budget and fiscal staff and our CFO's office to develop the division's budget as a part of the department's budget whole. And then also executing that budget for our hiring, for our build out need, and all of those things. So our current fiscal year approved budget is $28.4 million, which, as I recall, is actually a little bit higher than the fiscal year budget the commission is currently operating under. And again, that includes headcount, that includes the lab build out, which has been an interesting budgeting process, right? Because we had no idea what the needs would be. Right? We didn't know, some of the very interesting issues that we would find as we tore the old lab apart. I still think about it often. We were pulling out and there was the fridge, and you worry, okay, well, someone's lunch going to be in there, but we actually found was a vial of eyeballs, and it was unlabeled, and we said, okay, well, we really hope that's, they were bovine, we're assured, but it's just been a very interesting.
Eyeballs.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, from cows. And so just gutting and building an entirely new lab, right? I mean, it was an extraordinary and interesting budgeting process. But again, as the commission has experienced, every year that process looked different. We didn't know what our needs would be, right? When I was looking at the fiscal 22 budget, I wasn't anticipating building an entire new bureau of lab testing and building a physical lab and all the things that would go with it. We have since I've started, we're transitioning from the original job title for inspectors, which was just the ag title we borrowed, to now cannabis trainees and regulators. So what does that process look like? I have worked with and have a great deal of experience engaging with not one, but two bargaining units that my staff is. So our field staff is one bargaining unit and our office staff is another. So working with them throughout the hiring process, developing new positions, developing the job breakdowns and where those lines have to end. And then, of course, working with them to budget what headcount will be. That also involves, we built out a number of electronic systems. Right? When I say that I want us to be a regulatory unit for the 21st century, that means you got to actually mean it. Right? So we built out a new business enterprise portal in which all the businesses will be able to do all the registrations that are currently manual. One of the very first things I did was we moved from a physical agent badge to a digital one. Right, which has saved the department hundreds of dollars a month just on postage, right? I mean, that everything else alone. And then what we're able to do is work with the developers so that every agent in a facility is able to have their agent badge in their Google or Apple wallet on their phones. Right? And if they want, they can print it off and have a physical copy if they'd like that. But that was also necessary in terms of, if you are pulled over, you have that agent badge there, and you can say, I work in a facility. Though the Illinois Supreme Court has now ruled that the scent is not enough to justify a pullover. We're also working on developing an inspections database so that we can, again, move off of some of the older systems that were very, very manually intensive and have everything available for our inspectors. So you can see the blueprints, you can see the enforcement and inspections history, you can see their approved alterations or modifications. Through the enterprise portal, you can even see the entire list of approved agent badges for that facility, right? Making sure that those systems exist to support our staff. But again, you're budgeting for these massive digital upgrades that we haven't done before. So this has been my experience is creating a budget, and then to actually execute on these ideas and get them done and utilizing the budget process to do that. And then to your last question, what might you do different?
Yes.
There are obviously challenges with the current organization structure. One of the things I think probably needs to be examined is the number of and the structure of direct reports to the executive director and the process that they go through. I think an issue that needs to be addressed is the process by which commissioners have questions. How were those addressed? Right? How is staff time utilized by commissioners when the needs arise? And what is the process for that allows the supervisor to be properly briefed and sign off on time, and be aware of that work, but also allows for the commission needs to be done. And it's always been a challenge. There's always been an inherent tension in how the commissioners are able to interact with staff. Clarifying that process and creating just an SOP for what that looks like, I think is going to be a key piece of what the executive director does. Clarifying how the direct reports operate with the executive director is another key piece of that. Again, not to say that the executive director's time is more valuable, but making sure that everyone is able to actually get their needs met and there's an appropriate reporting structure similar to that of other agencies. Right? And that is easy to do. This one is not reinventing the wheel, right? There are other commissions in Massachusetts. There are other agencies. We can look to them. What's working well, what's not, what's working well for us, what's not. And again, this goes back to the communications question. What's working for commissioners? What are your needs? How do we address them? What's working for staff? What's stressful? What is hard for them? And how do we address that? This is not, again, not to minimize those challenges, but this is not something that is new. Right? This agencies consider and reinvent themselves all the time. And that is something that this commission is certainly able to do, given the experiences that all of you have, that the staff has, and again, given the executive director you're about to bring on. This is something we could fix.
Thank you.
Commissioner Camargo.
Now thinking about that yoga again.
So, we have three questions each. So I want to be very mindful of what question I get to ask you, because then we don't know what I don't know what other commissioners' questions are. So,
my time is yours this morning.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. I know we have a long day, but I guess what I would like to hear, and again, I saw the questions before, and I know that you talked a little bit about, all the candidates talked a little bit about crisis management. How do you handle media leaks, whether true or fake news or nonsense? How do you deal with that at a leadership level, at a staff level, but also at a morale level, and on an outside level that interferes with reality and then the work that needs to happen and the work that is happening currently at the commission?
working in cannabis is an extraordinary opportunity. And you get the chance to move policy forward in a way that you don't in virtually any other regulated space. It also has greater challenges that I've experienced anywhere else. It can be incredibly isolating on good days. You face an industry that is often unsure of its footing because of factors often very beyond this commission's control. You are building out. It is extremely public. You all can't talk to each other except under a camera, especially now. It's isolating and it is hard. And that the way that we deal with that sets the tone for everything else. I have focused and made an extraordinary effort to shape that culture of my staff. Right? And it's easy at a department like Ag that already has the spaces, but we're building something new. I have told them time and time again, one of the only two things we can control is the culture we have and the way that we respond to things. Because we are going to get hit. We're going to miss things. Things are going to fall through the cracks. Things are going to come up that we never anticipated. I was at the commission when the vitamin E acetate issue came up, right? And it was chaotic, and it hit everybody. Right? This wasn't unique to us. It comes back, and I hope you'll forgive a repeat answer here. But the very first part of this, the very core of it, is that communication. The disappointment, the frustration, the anger that thrives when people don't know what's going on. And I have seen firsthand, both here and in Illinois, how quickly that can take off. Right? It takes hours of someone hears something and then it's everywhere. Right? And it is a challenge. And it is, I mean, I think that's the phrase, right? The lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has put its boots on, right? And that's true for us. And it is an extraordinary challenge because everything is questioned, right? Your integrity is questioned. Your dedication is questioned. Your commitment to the values that you come to work every day in a challenging circumstance are questioned. A huge part to your question of addressing those things isn't how you react to the thing when it comes up. It's actually related to the culture and the system you build, because that's what reacts to those things. It involves, as a manager and as a leader, you don't act off your gut. You don't shoot from the hip. You take time to consider how you're going to respond to those things. And that's true of personnel issues, right? When there's a crisis or an emergency just among the people you manage. And it's true of factors. And every area has its own challenges, but I have never seen anything that at this level where you take the hits from inside and outside the way that cannabis entities do right now. And again, it's very stressful. It's high profile. It's hard. You're building something new. So building a culture in which asking a question is good, in which leaning on someone else is good, in which we treat it like a team, right? And that sounds like a fuzzy answer, but this is something I drill every day into our bureau chiefs and expect for them to drill in for their supervisors, that I expect them to drill on for our line staff, which is we are a team together. Things are going to happen. I'm not coming down on someone because of something we missed. It is so destructive to morale, to teams, to feel that you have the sword of Damocles hanging over you by its thread at any given time when you miss something, because the way that this works, the stuff that's incoming and the speed at which it's incoming, is impossible to do this job perfectly. We're all flawed. So making sure that everyone knows that they are supported, that they will be listened to, that they will have the chance to talk through what happened, and that we will address it. Knowing that as the division manager, I'm not going to sit here and throw them under the bus. Publicly, anything that happens is my fault. And this is something that, the director of our agency has been great on too. It's my fault. And then we talk about how to fix it. Right? Nothing ever lands on staff. So when there's leaks, right, they'll happen. People like to talk. There's issues. People are hostile. we've gone through this a couple of rounds. Most recently, we were working on a hemp regulation bill, which passed our Senate, did not pass our House. The industry was very aggressive in how that bill was being negotiated, right? And taking those hits and making sure that we're focused on it, doing the mission. We've got that internal discipline and supportive structure to address those things. And then you get to the external, right? And the external is key. You have to coordinate. Everybody that's involved, you got to talk to them, right? There's no going off on your own. You engage with every stakeholder that you've got to work with, right? And this is where the experience of sort of Illinois strain structure is actually a strength for Massachusetts, right? Because if there's a public health issue, we're working with multiple agencies. We're working with the governor's office. We're working with our own leadership, and they're extraordinarily responsive, but it does take some process management to make sure that that's done right. But that is an experience I have, is working with each of these departments, working with each of the staffs to make sure that we are coordinated in how we address these things, how we react to them, that we are positive, and to the point that both of you have raised, that we are transparent. If there's a screw up, we're going to talk about it. Yeah, we missed it. And this is how we're going to fix it. Or this issue's come to us. It's not one that we've ever dealt with before. We had an issue where there was a supplement being used in one of the products, and the labeling covered the usage for the cannabis, the THC product, but not for the supplement. Right? And the supplement, at the levels, if you use just according to the THC requirements, could cause liver failure, which in a product that is being given to patients, some of whom may not be on dialysis or other things, would be deadly. It also could potentially impact the menstrual cycle, either starting it or stopping it, which could override birth control or could cause miscarriage. Right? And this was in products everywhere. Right? And so we had to immediately act. We worked with the licensee. We worked with the dispensaries. Again, this is where that cross-department cooperation was key to make sure that that product was pulled off, was big labeled correctly. We worked with them on an education plan so that consumers knew what was actually in it. But that also involved working with all of our other agencies, working with others to make sure that the communication was consistent and thorough. And y'all said the same thing, and also that it was right. The last 4 years and the 2 years before that were just an ever-growing series of crisis managements, right? We're building a brand new thing, being steady.
So I found it really notable that he just said what he had said, because I think I may know what he's talking about, but honestly, I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. And so to hear that on the record was a very interesting comment. I also thought it was interesting, before we get back into this, his comment about how the industry, he said, during hemp negotiations were, I believe he said aggressive during the negotiations. Definitely go back to see that moment to make sure I quoted him right. We're going to continue the video. I just bumped it back just a little bit so that we can continue where we left off.
The last 4 years and the 2 years before that were just an ever-growing series of crisis managements, right? We're building a brand new thing, being steady, being consistent, predictable, and even-handed, right? That is what our approach has been. That's been my approach. It's been our department's approach. It's been our administration's approach. And that's how we've succeeded in Illinois.
David, you said being handed? Is that what you said?
Even-handed.
Oh, even-handed.
Yes. Even-keeled.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
Even-handed.
Yes.
Yep.
That stability is key.
Thank you
Sorry.
so much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but-
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on Commissioner Camargo's question, in your current role,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you've had to deal with some crisis management, how forward-facing are you with the press? And do you do press engagements? And how do you describe your posture with the media and the press?
Sure. I have engaged with the press. The issue, it's issue based, right? Sometimes the governor's office communications handles it. Sometimes our PIO handles it. Sometimes I do. I work with all of those groups on our response consistently, and I have a great deal of experience to this. I have done press interviews. I have done written interviews. Speaking at the conferences where there are press present. When we did our rollout of all of our licenses after a great 2021, I led our department's briefing of the entire House and Senate. I've consistently been the division head with the director when we do our budget hearings. I was right up front on the negotiations over the hemp bill. Again, with legislature, with interest groups, with our advocacy organizations, with media. These are all things I have a great deal of experience with. And to the point of how do I approach the media, we've got to be constructive, right? And when we have information, let's share it. Let's do it the right way that reflects well on the commission and what reflects well on the commission staff, but that always takes responsibility for what it is we've done. And there's a lot of good things the commission's done. And when we miss, we have a strike, we got to own that too. The ownership, I think, is one of the key philosophies of how I run things. It's our mistake. We're going to own it. Let's be upfront with it. Talk about how we're going to fix it. And that's how you actually fix it. And that's how you create a creative and supportive structure in which people feel free to do things without that crippling fear that you're going to make a mistake. But we're also going to have really cool things happen. I had an issue where we were having somewhere in the region of 60 to 70% of our agent badge applications rejected. And we could not figure out what's happening. Right? That's a major problem. And he asked, so the position I told you about is for the entry level position that we can bring folks in. We had a relatively new staff, and he looked at it and he came to me and he said, I actually took some overtime and I looked at this, and a huge majority of these rejections are coming because they're not filling out the second page. So I redid the form and it's now one page. And we dropped that rejection rate down to single digits. Right. And that was one staff member, and he had a great idea. Fostering an air of collaboration in which staff feel that they can come up the chain of command and say, hey, I have an idea. And knowing that if it doesn't work out, that's going to be okay. Right. That is a key part of how I manage and how I lead. And it's the same way that I engage with our legislature, with our legislative staff, and with the media, with our administration. You know what we're doing. This is what it is. Yeah.
All right, last one.
Sure.
It's a toughie. You're currently serving in a professional position. If you were offered this job, what amount of time would you need to step down from your current role or transitioning into this our ED position?
It is. And knowing that this is a public interview, I think that's something I would have to work with my current administration on to develop. To that point, a big part of the reason that I am qualified to do this job and work with all of you is because of my current experience building and leading a unit of almost a very similar size. I believe in this team. I've built this team, and I have to do what's right by them and by my current administration, which has been extraordinarily supportive. And I think you have to do that in order to be the kind of person that you would want as the executive director here, right? Especially given what the circumstances have been. Consistency, stability. That's what I want to make sure that I've done for the people I work with and what I would want to do for the people here at the commission. So to give you a very short answer, I don't know. I would have to work with the administration I work for to ensure a proper transition and a proper handoff is done, because given all the hard work we've done, I would not want to do to them. I would not want to do that wrong to them. And so developing that handoff plan, developing a succession plan for that it's going to be a key part of that. And again, I don't think you'd want someone that would just drop it and come over here without doing that.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. Great discussion. Great questions from my colleagues. I greatly appreciate that.
They have questions.
Okay.
Who knows? Because you get to ask questions.
Do you have a question for us?
Yes. Do I have time to ask a question? Because you have 3 more candidates, so I'm very happy to cede my time in the interest of yours. It depends on what you prefer.
Well, we allot for you, we allot for everybody else.
Yeah. If there's one that's eating at you, go ahead and ask.
Okay, I will ask the one, and it is sort of flip a question that all 3 of you have asked apart, which is, to your perspective, what is the chief challenge facing the commission, and what is your expectation for what the executive director's role is going to be in fixing it?
Commissioner Roy.
Sure. Okay. I would say that back to organizational management, I think is crucial. We're no longer a startup. We've gone from a handful of employees to over 140, similar situation to you in Illinois. I'd say someone bringing in new ideas. Um, you mentioned the digital badging in the labs, and I know these are things we've all discussed. So that breath of fresh air of the new ideas, I think, are critically important, and also the challenges, right? So that you're fully aware of the current challenges. You mentioned them, right? The tensions, the internal rubs, and being able to take those head on. While at the same time on a parallel track, knowing the legislature is trying to address them as well. The fact that you're fully aware of that, it's not all roses, that there are challenges here, and that you're willing to accept that and productively and positively work to help improve those areas.
Commissioner?
Chairman?
Well, I'm happy to go next. Yeah, I would, great question. I would echo a lot of what Commissioner Roy said. It's, Massachusetts is in a different place than we were 6 years ago when the first dispensary opened. There's now more border state competition that a lot of our licensees relied on for a number of years. I think to Commissioner Roy's point, I still think there are things that we can do better. I'm always been of the mind, and I think you touched on this earlier, of we're not so old that we're stuck in these like hard and fast ways. What are the ways that we can continue to look at ourselves to improve? But this position is tough, regardless of whether we were smooth sailing or whether we were hitting bumpy waters. You're managing a staff, you're managing 5 full-time bosses. You're starting off with being interviewed in public. We have a cannabis advisory board who I would like to see, more activity and more engagement from. We're mindful of the fact that a lot of folks who are in this industry have invested a lot of their own money, a lot of their family and friends' own money, and a lot of their own sweat equity to pursue this opportunity. And we're mindful of that every time we talk about licenses, every time we talk about regulations. So it's a challenge, and it's still new. And the close cooperation with the other jurisdictions is extremely helpful, because, as you pointed out earlier, there's no federal guidebook to this yet. And there may never be. Who knows?
Sounds awfully optimistic to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the challenge as I see it.
Thank you, Chair.
Great question for us. Thank you. I would definitely echo what my colleague said, but also I think, and I've been on maybe like 2 other interview panels here at the commission during my time. And I think one of the challenges, Commissioner Stebbins said it, it's sort of 5 commissioners, and being able to manage and understand all our point of views. Commissioner Roy and I looked at each other when you said succession planning. I wrote it down. It's one of my things. I always say commissioners come and go, and at any time. And our staff is pretty much here, and have been very, they stay for, they love what they do. And I think, the challenge is, or what I would expect, I guess, from my perspective, is an executive director that's also sort of like I don't want to say not a chief people officer, because that's not the job, but to understand employees. Because I always say this at public meetings: we cannot do any of the work that we do without our team. They make us look great. Or, if we mess up, then we look bad, and it's all of us together, right? But policy, investigations, research, nothing moves in this place without our experts that we have at this agency. So I would hope and expect from an executive director that coming in, they understand the different layers of this industry and this agency, and then the outside layers as well. And And I think that's an expectation, and it's really difficult. That's why I asked you the first question, like, why do you really want this job? Like, for real, right? Because it is very challenging. However, I think it's also very rewarding. And I think everybody who's here loves the work that they do. And it's you know, there's tons of money involved and tons of politics involved, right? At the same time.
That's you.
Yes, right. In general, right. So, and this is a real conversation, right? Because we want to make sure that whoever we bring here understands those challenges. So that would just be from my perspective, along with everything that the commissioners mentioned.
If
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, if I may, I just want thank you, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I appreciate something you said. As far as the question about with the media and the press, and it's important that you celebrate the wins, but you own the warts,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that the buck stops with you to own the warts. And so I think that's critically important. And I appreciate because we do a lot of good things, right? And it's important to celebrate those, but also own the challenges that the industry is facing. And there are many of them. And we are trying to get to them, and there are a lot. And so we got to keep our foot on the gas to address all of those. So thank you.
Again, to go back to what you said at the beginning, those challenges are huge. And you're trying to face them with, these ankle weights of some of the stuff that you don't want to be dealing with. This isn't moving us forward, right? And so the chance to bring this extensive, not only cannabis policy experience, but also management experience, the institutional knowledge, but still an outside perspective to addressing these issues. I mean, that's what I bring to you. Is I know where the bathrooms are, right? And I know how to address these things. I have an established track record, and not only doing it, but doing it in a way that walks the walk of both diverse hiring and equity in an industry with enormous challenges as states around you legalize. This is the experience I bring to you, and I am very thankful for the chance to be back here to speak with all of you this morning and for consideration of this. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for putting yourself out there. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And I will take this water. So
5-minute break. I don't want to get behind.
All right. So that was David Lakeman's interview for the Massachusetts CCC. I'll get back to David here in just a moment, but if you're still watching right now, it's because you're like me, and that was really exciting. And I say that sort of sarcastically, but could you imagine if we had something like that in Illinois? Like, I've never seen any of these regulators interview, right? And that would be awesome to see. I've never seen, I'd love to see what these conversations actually look like. I might go back and watch more of the CCC. Hell, I might start covering Massachusetts since there's so much transparency over there. And again, I know things aren't perfect in Massachusetts, but you can live stream it. That's fucking cool. We don't get that in Illinois. And I just have to say, whatever we do going forward, I hope it's live streamed. All right. So this is an interesting development in Illinois cannabis policy. If David Lakeman leaves, I just have to say, big loss of knowledge. Big loss of knowledge. If you watch that, you know now how knowledgeable he is on all of these subjects. He obviously knows how to regulate. David has been on my show in the past. I'll have that link in the show notes. I don't know if I edited it out. I usually don't edit anything out of my podcast. I don't think I edited it out. But I'm pretty sure I butchered a reference to Regulate, which is by Warren G. and Nate Dogg. And I believe I said Nate Dogg or Snoop Dogg, and I don't even know. And I it makes me want to make sure that I got this right. Regulate. Warren G. I think I did butcher it. Warren G. And featuring Nate Dogg. Okay, so I got that right. Anyways, but when I had David Lakeman on my podcast the first time when I went to the Illinois Department of Agriculture, to his office, totally butchered that. Tried to make a regulator joke using the song Regulate. Didn't work well. Anyways, back to what we were actually talking about and not my horrible attempts at comedy. if David Lakeman accepts this position, which I don't see why he wouldn't. I mean, he flew to Massachusetts, gave a public interview. I'm assuming, like I said earlier, that not everything is live streamed. So I assume there were some private interviews that led to that public interview. I don't know, though. I'd have to dig in deeper to see exactly how that process worked. But however, whatever the case may be, David Lakeman flew to Massachusetts, gave a live interview. I mean, I would assume, again, he's definitely notified everybody at the state of Illinois that this is something he's doing, so they weren't surprised when they saw a live stream of him on the Massachusetts CCC live stream or here on the Cole Memo. I'm assuming, that he's informed his counterparts at the state of Illinois that he was pursuing this. And I'm assuming because of all of those reasons, he's seriously considering it. And being that he came from Massachusetts, I feel it would make sense that he goes back to Massachusetts. I thought his answer was interesting on why do you want this job? And it almost, if I'm recalling it correctly, he almost made it sound like coming back to finish the job type of thing. So, like I said, has a way with words and definitely understands the process. Not only here in Illinois, but it sounds like in Massachusetts. He had a really good analogy. He knows where to find the places he needs to be. He not only joked, to find the state house, but the bathrooms. He doesn't need a tour guide. He knows all of the places and how they play with each other. And for all those reasons, I mean, I think he literally mentioned he used to work with the executive director. I don't believe this was a new position. I believe it's just a position that needs to be fulfilled. So, for all those reasons, it does seem it would make sense for him to. It makes sense that the CCC unanimously voted for him to be the next executive director. I think, again, it would make sense to see him accept that position. I don't know, maybe they can't work with him on salary. I don't know. Who knows? That's why they did say on Monday that it's pending his salary negotiations, background check, everything else. I know he's going to pass all of those formalities, but it's subject to his acceptance. So we'll see. I'm sure there will be a press release probably today when I drop this podcast, but we'll share it in the future. Speaking of which, I appreciate you if you're still listening to this podcast. A lot of this information that I share on the podcast, I share first on social media. So if you want to see the scoops before I talk about them, definitely check it out. Follow me on Twitter or X, Instagram, and we're popping up on different social media all the time. You can also go to thecolememo.com. That's where you can find all of our episodes. That's where you can support my work. If you're not listening to this episode on Patreon, you're listening to this episode later than my patrons. You can become a patron at thecolememo.com/Patreon. That's Patreon. And it's one of the best ways to support our show. It's only $3 a month, and you get instant access to all of our episodes as they release. I always release all of my content for free, but if you want to support me and get instant access to my content as it comes off the wire, you can go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. Again, I wrote a few articles on this subject. Definitely check them out. They'll be in the show notes. Check out my interview with David Lakeman. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I should mention. I guess, this is just like maybe me trying to be funny again, but because I have talked to David Lakeman on the podcast and in person a few different times, I don't know if you felt it, but this is just a comment I have. There's just this, having been in many job interviews, not only being interviewed, but being on the other side of a job interview where, I've actually been interviewing people applying for a job. There's this just awkwardness. And if David Lakeman is watching this right now, or anybody that's recently been through a job interview, you know what I'm talking about. And again, I tried to say this to somebody else that was watching this. I was like, this is so awkward. And they're like, what do you mean it's awkward? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's not even that I know David Lakeman, but I've talked to him a few times. And so I can tell, it's just interesting. And maybe if you've been in job interviews, you know what I mean? And it wasn't just David Lakeman. I want to be clear. There were other candidates that I watched interview for this position where I felt the exact same way. In fact, there was one, I don't recall his name right now. And by the way, I'll have a link to the full proceedings if you'd like to watch it. It's like 8 hours of stuff. So if you liked that, there's more. Um, there were a few other interviews that were given, and one guy, so I think they were all asked the same questions. So, David was asked, when can you transition? And he gave a very great answer, which is like, look, I want to make sure I leave my team in good hands, right? That's, I think, what you would expect of an executive director. And I want to make sure that I don't do that he said it much better than I could. There was somebody else that was asked that same exact question. And so the question was like, hey, you're in a professional position now. When can you start? And the guy was literally just like, tomorrow. I can start tomorrow. And they're like, don't you need to like hand anything off or anything? And he's like, well, yeah. The position will need to be backfilled, and there's certainly some things that will have to be handed off. And it was just like, dude, look, I am nowhere. I would not even have gotten the call. So no offense to that person, right? He got the call. He got the opportunity to interview. I never would be on one of those streams. I never will be. But dude, come on. I know that, again, these interviews, they're tough, but brother, 2 weeks is like pretty well common courtesy. And in a professional position, unfortunately, I've never been in one of those positions, I should say first. But what I was going to say is, unfortunately, in a professional position, from what I've heard, because again, never occupied one, you have to give a lot more than 2 weeks notice. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this transition between David Lakeman and whoever the new person is going to be, hey, it's going to be me. I'm going to apply. So the transition between David Lakeman and Cole Preston as the cannabis division manager is likely going to take, I don't know, 6 months. That's what I would want at least, because David knows a lot of shit and we got to catch up, right? So, like, yeah, we got to figure this shit out. How do you do what you do? How do you, one of his probably first pieces of advice is going to be, Cole, you have to stop the Cole memo. Not that it is a great podcast, and not that I'm not your number one fan. I'm just trying to be funny here, by the way. But you can't host a podcast as the division manager. I don't know why you can't. I don't know. I just feel like this would be some of his advice. Anyways, I was trying to be funny again. I'm not a funny person. Yeah, I would just say that I don't think, just to kind of get back to it and away from my awful attempts at comedy, I would say that it's going to take a while to do this transition. And I don't know, maybe 6 months is a lot, maybe too much, maybe 3 months, maybe a month. I don't know. I feel like 3 months, it's like a sweet spot, because realize, and actually, now that I say that, if you read my article about David Lakeman being selected as the executive director, in the background section, as I said at the beginning of the show, David Lakeman started in September of 2020. He replaced Jeff Cox, who reportedly left in June of 2020. Now, that's obviously a different situation. I don't mean to say obviously a different situation, but that seems to be a different situation because Jeff Cox left in June. And so I don't know for certain, but if David didn't start till September, that's that's a couple months without, training. So, more than a couple, 2, 3. Yeah. Anyways. So yeah, you need the you need that smooth transition. And to his point, he's going to try to do that, but we'll see. We'll see. Stay tuned for a press release. I'll try to share it on my social media or anything when I hear more. I hope you enjoyed this value of the Cole memo. I hope you found value in it. I hope there was at least something in there that you found value. And again, the high level thought I want you to take home, if you're still listening, is that it'd be freaking awesome if we live streamed some more cannabis policy meetings in Illinois and other states, by the way. No, I'm focusing on Illinois, but if you're not from Illinois, wouldn't it be cool if all of the cannabis policy discussions were live streamed for the record? That's kind of why I did today's show. Even though it's out there for the record and the CCC, I kind of want to expand the record, put it on the people, put it on the radar for my Illinois people, because this is the departure of one of our cannabis regulators, potentially, if he accepts this position. So we shall see. Folks, I hope, again, that you found value in this episode of the Cole Memo. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.